Welcome to the work session of the City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, to be held April 9, 2019 at 6 p.m. at the Cottonwood Council Chambers building. Could we please have the clerk take the roll?
Councilmember Althouse?
Here.
Councilmember Hulse?
Here.
Councilmember Howdigi?
Here.
Councilmember Matthews?
Here.
Councilmember Naren?
Here.
Vice Mayor Henry?
Here.
Mayor Alinsky.
Here, thank you. Okay, it's a work session. We have two items tonight, items for discussion, consideration, and possible direction to staff. First item for discussion is a discussion and possible direction regarding residential solid waste and recycling services within the city. Mr. Corbin.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So in my few short months since I've been here, a few council members have come up to me and asked me to bring this topic to council to decide on a direction. This is a work session, so there's no decisions being made tonight, but we wanted to explore several options for the truck traffic in our community. As you know, trash trucks cause a little bit of problems to our roads. There's noise issues, and we have many operators in the community. So I've asked staff, so Jeff is going to be giving a presentation later in a few minutes that talks about some options that we could start to consider. If you decide you want to go down this path, then we'll start the community involvement. We'll do an RFP depending on the direction you want to get. So this is just to get the discussion started to see if you want staff to investigate or move the ball further down the court. During the discussions, we decided to talk about recycling. Currently, not everybody recycles. We have a lot of booths, collection points in the community for recycling. So we thought, well, let's see if we could partner with the Sustainability Alliance and see what their thoughts on the process were. So we've kind of made this an all-encompassing issue with trash and the environment and recycling and reducing the amount of trash going to the landfill. So there's lots of different ways to look at this. We thought that they might make a great partner, and so I asked them to come present some information also. So that's kind of how we're going to begin the conversation tonight, is with the presentation from Darcy Hitchcock and Lisa Voss from the Sustainability Alliance, and she also has another person in the audience to help answer questions, but we thought we'd start with that. Then we'll move into Jeff giving a presentation on what we found so far and seek directions and answer questions at the end.
Sounds great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and have Lisa Voss then and Darcy Hitchcock come up. Thanks so much to both of you and the Sustainability Alliance for your time on this. Appreciate it very much.
Well, and thank you for having this conversation. It's incredibly important, and thanks for inviting us in. So as mentioned, my name is Lisa Voss. I'm the Business Program Manager for the Sustainability Alliance. And I'm hoping to get the...
Yeah, that's a PDF.
Okay,
Aha. All right. So we understand that you're trying to reduce the number of trucks on the road, and we think that's a great idea. It will have all kinds of benefits, as mentioned. It will reduce noise, pollution, road damage, and all kinds of disruption. So tonight we want to offer a few thoughts about how a view toward recycling and economic development can help increase your impact even more there. Now with recycling, it's important to understand that different methods have very different outcomes. This chart compares the most common methods of recycling with respect to customer effort and the amount and quality of material that's able to be recovered. So looking at the far right of the chart, you have mixed waste processing. This is what Patriot does, where all the material goes into one bin, both trash and recyclables, to be sorted by the hauler. Now, this is clearly the easiest for the customer, but it also has the lowest rate of recovery. And this is because when you mix these materials, some of them get damaged. For example, think about trying to bring out clean office paper from greasy pizza boxes and used cat litter. So a lot of material gets contaminated, so it can't be sold, and it goes to the landfill anyway. As you move left, the customer starts to do some of their own separation. And so single stream recycling, which is what Taylor does, all recyclables go into one bin and trash into the other. So this is a little better, but you still have the contamination issue. Oily liquids and broken glass can damage fibers like paper and cardboard, again, making them unusable. Another problem you have with single stream recycling is that customers end up dumping a lot of non-recyclables in the bin, hoping that just because it's in the blue bin, maybe magically it'll get recycled somewhere down the road. And in fact, this practice in, you think hoses and clothing and electronics and plastic bags, and the list goes on and on. And this practice is actually so common, it has a name. It's called wish cycling. Moving even further left, now you have dual stream recycling. And so this is better. You have separate bins for the fibers, like cardboard and paper, and then separate from containers like jars and cans. Now, this is a less common method these days, so we don't actually know of any examples around here of haulers who do that. And then moving farthest to the left, you have full source separation, where the customer actually separates all the recyclables into different containers and usually hauls it themselves to a drop-off site like Sedona Recycles. Clearly the most effort for the customer, but it also has by far the greatest recovery rate of all the materials. And so the question is, are customers willing to go to all that effort to separate and transport their recyclables? Well, one clue might be seen in the Mingus High School drop-off site. So it turns out this is one of the most heavily used sites in all of Verde Valley for Sedona Recycles. In fact, last year, over 500 tons of material was recovered there. And it was such high quality that almost all of it was able to be sold. And so the fact that residents are taking the initiative to separate their recyclables, bring them over there, drop them off with basically no external incentive suggests that it's pretty important to them and they're willing to do the work. So in recycling, the goal is always to have the greatest amount of recovery at a reasonable cost with a method people will use. Now, we don't know the true number of Cottonwood residents who separate their own recyclables. And in fact, you might want to do a survey to find that out. But let's say it's 10%. And if that 10% is done right, then basically 100% of that material can get recovered. So right there, you're already at the recovery rate that a hauler like Patriot is proposing. So that means if you can take that 10% participation and boost that to even 15 or 20%, you've made a big impact. And if you also have a general hauler who can recover some of the material that doesn't happen to get separated, then you're even further ahead.
So recycling is a pretty tough business these days. The value of the materials isn't enough right now to pay for the processing. So to provide this service, one way or another, it has to get paid for. But the municipality may be able to recover some of these costs by gathering these materials and using them for economic development, rather than us gathering them and shipping them off to some other community where they turn them into value-added products. Why can't we do that here? So what does this mean? The chart on the right comes from the EPA, and what you'll see, I think there's a pointer here, is, so we've got paper, glass, metals, plastics. These are all recyclables. That's over half the waste stream in a typical municipal waste stream. And then over here, you've got food, yard trimmings, and you can't see it, but that's wood. So those are all compostable. So the vast majority of what goes in what we call trash isn't trash at all. It's valuable materials that are getting hauled off to the landfill oftentimes. It makes me wonder, why do we think in terms of trash hauling at all? Why aren't we talking about compost and recycling pickup? Where I used to live, they picked up compost and recycling every week and trash once a month, because you don't have that much of it. You can see that there really isn't that much. So what would happen if we could start developing businesses that could capture some of these materials and do something with it? We have just a couple ideas to seed your thinking. One is, if you take what was on the left, that compost stuff, if there was a business in town that could compost those materials, then that compost could go to farms, it could go to the vineyards, it could go to the nurseries, improve the soil improve the water retention, reduce flooding. So there are many benefits of using compost. One way of composting is to use worms to break it down. And those what they're referred to as castings, the polite way of referring to their poop, actually goes for somewhere between $4 to $5 a pound. That's a little less than gourmet coffee, okay? So this is a high value product that we could be selling. Another idea is right here in Old Town Cottonwood, we have all of these wineries that have tasting rooms. If somebody could buy a glass cutter, they could take those old wine bottles that they've just emptied into people's glasses, cut them off, turn them into glasses that the customers could then buy and take home with their logo on it. All these are little economic development opportunities that are not going to make anybody wildly rich, but they're little Cottonwood scale businesses that we could do. Another is, if you think about recycling, another opportunity is to pelletize some of the plastic can become a filament that is used in 3D printers. And Yavapai College has an entire program teaching kids how to make stuff out of 3D printers. So why aren't we capturing it, pelletizing it, selling it to Yavapai College? We're not going to serve the entire country, but we probably have enough to serve and sell to them. And that's going for $50 for 5 kilograms. Just the pelletized stuff. I'm sure the filament costs even more. The irony here is that this week, Vivi Rio, our Regional Economic Development Group, is doing a Shark Tank-like event that they're calling Moonshot. So would it be possible in future years for us to say, let's focus some of that effort toward finding and creating new businesses that can take our waste streams and turn them into valuable products. So I'm hoping that we can stop throwing away our economic opportunities into the trash. So those were our 2 messages that we wanted to share with you. As you think about narrowing down the number of haulers, you also have an opportunity to capture the value that would otherwise go to the landfill. Can you recycle? Can you compost? Can we develop businesses and jobs here for people in your community? And as those people start working in these jobs, they're more likely to want to recycle. Their neighbors are going to want to recycle more, so that percentage that Lisa was talking about a little bit should go up over time. So those were our thoughts. I hope that's useful. We're going to stick around after your presentation and happy to explore this more. Thank you so much for your time. And we do have Jill McCutcheon. We forgot to introduce her with Sedona Recycles. We asked her to come along. Obviously, she's one of the interested parties here, but she's also our local expert on waste recovery. So we wanted her here in case you asked us technical questions. We couldn't answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hitchcock, for being here. Any questions for the Sustainability Alliance before we move on? No, and I just wanted to mention that last you and I met, you brought up the idea of a regional facility where we would process waste, and I think any hauler in the area would agree that that's the most expensive part of dealing with our waste in the valley is hauling it up over the hill, to get to a landfill either on the Prescott side or down by Dewey Humboldt. So again, as we look at this, I think we need to look at it regionally because we're facing the same problems that Sedona is, Camp Verde, and if we did have a regional facility, it would be an economic driver, create jobs, and kind of put us on the map for being sustainable community, sustainable Verde Valley. So anyway, I appreciate you being in here. Thank you.
I do have a question though. Regardless of the number of hauler question, I mean, we're kind of tying those together tonight, but do we necessarily need to do that?
You mean regarding recycling versus number of haulers?
Correct.
No, I don't think. They can be 2 separate issues. Yeah. Okay. All right, then shall we have Mr. Cook step up and give us your presentation?
Okay, let's see here.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jeff Cook, the Contract and Purchasing Administrator for the City of Cottonwood. Tonight, my presentation is obviously more focused on waste removal. They touched on the recycling. I've got recycling in the title of mine here. But I've got an overview of what I'm going to be speaking on tonight. First off, a background of why we're going to be discussing the topic of waste removal, the current system operating in the City of Cottonwood, some alternative options, pros and cons to each of those options. We've got some fee models from other municipalities within the state that we're going to look at. We've got neighboring community approaches, and then ultimately a discussion and maybe some direction to staff. So a little background, this isn't a new topic to Cottonwood. Prior discussions have taken place September of 2013 and May of 2017. Neither of those discussions resulted in any action by the city. And so tonight marks the third time in a 6-year span that it's come up, and I think this next statement is really one of the major drivers of that, the reason why it continues to come up. And it's been discussed tonight already, but I'm going to go ahead and read this. Countless studies across the U.S. provide a significant body of evidence supporting the fact that solid waste collection trucks cause a disproportionate amount of wear and damage to streets. And so to quantify that, we reached out to the city of Sedona, who performed an analysis in 2016, citing several studies equating one trip from a single trash hauling truck to approximately 1,000 passenger car trips. And that was on the low end of things. And I can show the various studies, but in general, at least 1,000 trips. And so the current system in the city of Cottonwood, as we all know, is an unregulated system. I say there's 3 major providers. There's 2 seem to dominate the market, but there are 3. They offer various recycling approaches that have been spoken on tonight, single stream versus mixed waste. There's varying costs, but the key takeaway is that those 3 providers currently place 3 to 4 trucks on any given city street weekly. And I apologize, I think your report said 4 to 5 trucks, but after a little more research, I think 3 to 4 was a more accurate number. So that's the reason for the discrepancy there. I just wanted to clarify that. So those 3 to 4 trucks can be equated to the same wear and damage as 3,000 or 4,000 passenger trips, or trips from passenger vehicles, regular vehicles. And so we've looked at some alternative options. The first is what we're calling a city partner. And the idea here is to contract with a single provider without precluding others from operating in the city, who the city would endorse as our endorsed partner. We would hope that there would be a reduction in cost to citizens based on the competitive process. And we'd also have the option to include waste collection fees on our city utility bills. Second option is the single hauler method. This is a method I think that we're all familiar with in relating to the town of Clarkdale, where it's the same type of request for proposal process, but then the end result is that we only allow one provider to operate citywide. And then we've got some fee model structures where we would maybe assess a permit or license fees to all the providers that operate. And so some pros and cons for the city partner method. The competitive process and endorsement would result in a lower cost of service and an option to include solid waste collection fees on the bills, which would promote the one-stop shop to our city citizens. We think that it's a pro that we're not precluding others from providing the service in the city, and there's a potential for a reduced number of waste collection trucks on the streets as customers hopefully move toward the endorsed option. Some cons, this method obviously doesn't immediately reduce the number of waste collection trucks on the streets. The inclusion of city waste collection fees on our utility bills will require additional city resources, and it's possible that the end result may yield little to no change versus the current system. The single hauler method, the top two pros I'm not going to repeat, they're the same. It's the competitive process, lower price, one-stop shop. This method would see a more immediate reduction in waste collection trucks on the streets and would also see the limited disruption in the neighborhoods. The cons to this method are the impact to local providers who may not be awarded the contract, and we're also potentially limiting citizens' freedom for their preferred vendor or recycling method, or both. And fee models. Some positives to this method are that the city would not preclude any others from providing the service. The fees collected could be used to recoup street maintenance repair costs. And city resources would not be used to include solid waste collection fees on utility bills. And the negative aspects of this method are the number of waste collection trucks on streets is not reduced. We're unable to limit disruption in neighborhoods, no option for the one-stop shop, and the fees collected may be nominal for the city of Cottonwood. And we've got that one starred because we've looked into some other fee models for municipalities within the state. And as you can see, the top three, Surprise, Wickenburg, and Chandler, all have a similar structure. They title it a different thing, but it's basically an annual application fee or permit fee, and then either a per vehicle cost annually or per axle, just depending on how they look at it. The city of Maricopa has an annual application fee, but they collect 2% of the hauler's gross receipts collected from their city customers. And to put it in perspective, we took a look at what this may mean for the city of Cottonwood. Maricopa they collected $65,000 in fiscal year 18 based on their method. And they have a population of about 52,000. And rough estimate, I believe staff is thinking 15 to 20,000 for the city of Cottonwood if we were to implement some blend of fees like this, which we know is a small fraction of cost to repair streets. Our neighboring community approaches. The town of Clarkdale has operated with a single provider for 30 years. The city of Sedona, their community strongly rejected the option of a single hauler after an in-depth study. Which begs the question, which option is the best for Cottonwood? And we've got the three options there. And then tying in, and if we're keeping those separate, which we can definitely do, if we did decide to solicit proposals for residential waste, being either the city partner or single hauler method, would we like to include an environmental stewardship piece or reduction of waste into landfill component into the scoring criteria in that RFP? And so that sums up my presentation, and I'm open to any questions or
Questions
comments.
for Mr. Cook?
Yeah. So, in your opinion, why did the last two conversations die at that point? Why did it not move forward?
I would assume they were controversial from what I've heard. I wasn't here in 2013 to witness that one, and I wasn't part of the process in 2017, but from what I hear, they were controversial topics. We're dealing with the same providers who operate in the city of Sedona, and so it may be something similar to that.
I can speak to it.
Yeah, can you speak to 2017? Because I went back and looked, and I can't find it, and I don't remember specifically having this conversation. I thought it was about burning and the issues we were having over at the plant. I don't remember having this conversation, but then sometimes I don't remember yesterday, so it's...
Rudy Rodriguez, I'm the Deputy City Manager. I'm sorry.
Tosca, could you?
No, I agree. Some background would be helpful.
Okay.
The burning issue was a totally different issue. Okay. The issue became freedom of choice. We have three haulers, and one of them is local, another one is a very large company, another one obviously is out of Prescott. And at that time, I think we had 4 haulers at that time, and Northern Arizona Waste was also around. And the big issue was, we want the freedom to go ahead and pick who we want. It's unfair that the council should make decisions for the citizens, and it kind of died there.
Did it come to council?
Yes, there was some discussion with council. There was if we can probably look up those particular minutes.
Because I'm looking at Tosca and she doesn't remember either. Tim, do you remember?
I remember 2013 more than 17.
I don't think it came, this topic wasn't discussed in.
Not for this council. The dates on it are several years back.
Well, if you say 2017, Tosca, Ruben, and myself were up here, and we're not, and I don't know if Ruben, if you remember.
I checked with the clerk's office who provided me the information and minutes with the discussion, so I'm happy to provide that.
If you could.
It wasn't a topic brought, but the discussion did take place around another topic that was being discussed. And I'm happy to provide that to you.
And just, you know, in 2013, and I don't know if that was the specific year, but I'm assuming it was, when we brought it up for a discussion that's basically like what we're having now, you know, where we really were taking a closer look at it than we have in years past. It was controversial, and we were talking about, you know, the possibility of putting a locally owned business out of business. That's kind of the way it would appear to some locally owned businesses, and it's a difficult decision for council to make, difficult conversation for local haulers to be engaged in. At that time, we had more local haulers, and I think many of them felt like the larger nationwide haulers would have an advantage over the smaller locally owned businesses. And so that, coupled with folks believing that it's their right to be able to choose which private business they wanted to engage with, the conversation just didn't go any further. So it's always a difficult balance. You know, we have to balance the impact on our infrastructure and the fact that we as a council really want to put more money into our infrastructure to fix it up and improve it, and the community wants that as well. We're trying to be responsive to the community. At the same time, we want to be business friendly. We certainly don't want to put any business out of business. We want to be an open market and encourage all businesses to thrive. And so it's a difficult decision. I think that's one of the reasons why I think the city partner method is a little bit more palatable for me, at least. You know, but you can look at our neighbors, and they would argue that their method works the best. You know, I think with Clarkdale, I've heard that they seem to love it. Single hauler works well for them. You know, they did that some 40 years ago or something.
30?
So,
Over 30.
Over 30.
So we should have been having this conversation 30 years ago. And
That would have been make my job easier.
right.
You know, I can say in my neighborhood, and I didn't know we had this many haulers until I moved to Cottonwood Ranch. When I lived on the villas, our trash was part of our homeowners association, and the homeowners association only allowed one provider in. So I just assumed we had one provider. And so when we moved up into the ranch, we just went to that provider because that's all I knew, and they still pick up my trash. Now, just today, you know, one of the providers came through. My provider came through, and you know they have to go on each street twice every time. So yeah, you have 3 trucks, but you have 6 really passes by because they have to get each side of the street. You know, have to get the right side, then they got to come around and get the other side, and it really. You know, it really is an impact to our roads. And yeah, I don't want to put any businesses out of business, and I, you know, believe in people's right to choose, but I also want to protect our streets. I strongly want to protect our streets, and these big trucks damage our streets. We have studies that show it, and so I personally like the single hauler method. But I understand why you know people support the city partner as well. But I don't think it necessarily is going to reduce.
No guarantee of it. No.
Yeah, there's no guarantee. So that's my where I'm at with it.
And that point was brought up too by some of our local haulers. A creative idea, of course, to minimize the impact on streets was to put the trash cans on one side of the street. So they're all. You know, in residential areas, you'd have to put it on one side of the street, and I think they even one side of the street for a certain amount of time, and the other side of the street for the other amount of time.
And then they forget and they're trashy.
Yeah, but it's an idea that, you know, it was a creative idea, but.
No, it's a very creative idea, and I think, you know, even that would help, yeah.
But I'm curious to hear other council members' take on this and see if we can try to provide staff some direction on if this is, if the other option we want to pursue is nothing, then we need to let staff know. Yes,
So,
sir.
I mean, I've exercised this on a smaller scale where we lived in a neighborhood and it was a private road and we paved the road and we maintained the road. So we all decided we were going to get one single hauler so that we didn't have 3 different trucks coming through every week and wear and tear on our road that we had to pay to maintain out of our pocket. And we also negotiated with that single hauler to give us a discount. I see the city partner as being possibly not even effective. We're just kind of hoping that it works out eventually. The fee model, I mean, $15,000, how many inches or street road do we get or road maintenance do we get on that? That just doesn't seem feasible. I mean, if we were going to do this, in my opinion, the single hauler method is the way to go. And I think we have 3 haulers in town.
No.
One is a national company. It's not franchised locally, is it? Waste Management?
No, I don't believe so.
I'm not really worried about a national company or kicking them. They'll be fine. So the other one is out of Prescott. So we really only have one local. And then the question comes down, if we work something out with maybe the one local company, do they have the capacity to be able to do that? Mm-hmm. So that's obviously something down the road and that needs to be discussed if we move forward. But I like the idea of that. We spend a lot of money on our roads. We're very concerned about them, and it seems like these trucks doing a lot of wear and tear on the road. I mean, one truck coming down is the same as 1,000 cars is something that I think is significant. So it's worth looking at.
Okay. Mr. Hulse, how do you feel?
I really like the idea of a single hauler, either city partner or a single hauler method, simply because, as has been pointed out, each trip is equivalent to 2,000 miles of or 2,000 cars traveling on your street every week on top of the normal traffic. All you have to do is drive on I-17, I-40, or I-10 to see what trucks do to the highway. And it's happening to our streets. We already have a financial problem of maintaining our streets. If we can cut down the amount of damage done to the individual residential streets, I think we would be well ahead as far as the city and our quality of life. My concerns are, how do we select a single hauler? Can we just arbitrarily pick a company? Do we have to go to bid every year? How does Clarkdale accomplish having a single hauler? Do they change on a regular basis?
So they issue a request for proposal,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like any request for proposal that we issue here as well, with a certain term contract. So a typical municipal contract is a 2 or 3 year term with a couple of extensions totaling 5 years. So I would imagine something along those lines.
Do you know what their track record is on haulers? Do they change every 3 to 5 years, or are they able to maintain the same company throughout?
I believe they just awarded recently to the same company they had on their prior contract the last time.
Do you know who that is offhand?
At Patriot Disposal.
Patriot, okay. That's one of my concerns because, you know, Gray Wolf is owned by Waste Management. If Waste Management decides they want the contract and they don't get it, all they have to do is raise the rates for the city to dump and put the hauler out of business, which I saw happen in Colorado, where haulers would try to come in and start a business, and Waste Management and a couple of other major companies would run them out of business just simply by underbidding them and outlasting them because of their ability to finance. And I would not like that to happen. Taylor's been around for over 20 years, 21 years that I know of, and has always done a good job. How many? 17 years. 17 years is all Taylor's been here? Could be. I know when we first moved home 21 years ago, we were using Waste Management, and I was really happy to get rid of them. But bottom line is I still go back to the amount of damage being done to our streets. And when you consider that you have 3 trucks every day somewhere in the city, and every day running on our collector and major arterial streets, and the amount of damage those trucks are creating by those trips, we're money ahead if we can eliminate a lot of those trips. It's just a question of whether it's better to do a city partner or single hauler.
Mr. Mayor, if it's appropriate, if I could just comment real quick, we would not do a low bid process.
Right.
We would do an RFP and have several factors in there to make sure it wasn't just someone coming in and underbidding the first year and then upping the prices kind of thing. And I think based on our first presentation tonight, we would also include some sustainability criteria in the RFP process. So it would be multifaceted and a process. It wouldn't just be a decision to pick someone and hope they work out kind of thing.
All right. Let's hear from the other end, if we could.
Well, I was just thinking that it would probably behoove us, being that this has come up before in the past and we're at a different juncture now than we were back then, to at least get more information on it. Part of my concern, though, is that once you give somebody a contract for 5 years, these other haulers are hit hard, and they may not be around the next time to bid. So all of a sudden you get the hauler who got the last 5 years contract, very likely, aside from something serious, negatively serious, they'll get the contract again. So we are, in essence, putting some people out of business, plain and simple.
And I agree with you. I think that's the difficult decision that we may be faced with. Private business is agile also, and I think that to speak to what Councilmember Matthews said, if one single hauler were awarded the city contract, would they have the capacity to handle all the clients within the city? And they likely would not, but you could see a merger of two private companies working together. So it's possible. We don't know that, obviously. But
why are we speculating? We had Mr. Taylor nodding when that question was asked earlier. If
We can't see him.
He's right there.
I know, but Jeff is in our way.
I don't think it's appropriate for council to speculate about what either any of the 3 haulers can do. I think we should ask that question respectfully.
Sure.
So can we ask Mr. Taylor to come up and shake his head so all of us can see him? Because I mean, Jeff is standing there. I would like to know.
On a diet, Jeff.
Does he have the capacity?
I don't think that's an appropriate question for tonight, because I think we should get all of the same information from all of we should go through the process. We shouldn't speculate or rely on misinformation.
Then why'd you point out that he shook his head and you knew the answer? I still don't know the answer. Did you shake your head again for me?
To answer your question, Councilmember Althouse, to encourage us to go through a thorough and thoughtful process with good information and not rely upon speculation when making a decision of this way.
That's fair.
Yep. Councilmember Naren, how do you feel?
Well, I've had a lot of complaints from citizens, not just since I've been newly appointed, but over the last couple of years about the state of our streets. And so citizens are concerned, and they want to know more about what are we going to do to fix the roads. And so if we could prevent some of the damage to begin with, I think that would be great, although I don't like the idea of limiting our citizens' choices. We are going to have to make a decision. And so if we're going to make a decision on any one of these, I think we would need to go with the one that would give us the best benefit. So I would lean more towards a single hauler method if we're going to do it. But I would certainly like to gather more information. Sure. and have more information before we make any decisions. And
yeah, absolutely. And this is really direction only, and just to see if this is a dead issue or not, and then we would do a thorough analysis.
I've got one other comment, just something to think about that I forgot to mention, but a lot of municipalities have their own trash collection. So this would be just kind of the same thing, in that we would just be essentially contracting that out instead of doing it in-house. So it's not unusual. In fact, I was where I grew up, I was more used to that. I mean, you just had people come out, it was the same people that came out and picked up your trash, whether it be municipal or private. So it's not unprecedented.
Right. City of Phoenix is that way. It's through the city, and you pay the city of Phoenix when, I mean, at least when I lived down in Phoenix, that's the way it was.
Still that way.
Okay. It may have changed.
Vice Mayor?
So I am really excited about exploring recycling options. I think that's a huge need here in Cottonwood. I'd like to see recycle bins on every street corner. I think we need to have more opportunities for recycling. It is something that many of our community members are vocal about. They would like that opportunity. I've heard different community members ask questions about the single stream, you know, what recycling is the most effective, et cetera. I'd love to explore that further. I'm glad that you, all of you were here tonight, and thank you for the information. As far as the options, I don't agree right now, at least with the information presented, with any of these three options. The city partner option, I think, is a gentle option, or we think it's gentle, but it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be effective. The single hauler method, who are we to choose who is the trash provider for each of our residents here? If our residents are more concerned with paying the extra dollars for our streets, which infrastructure is important to our residents, but why are we singling out our waste haulers? Why aren't we looking at the other trucks and the other heavy equipment and other load-bearing, you know, the heavy weight on our streets? I don't think it's fair to single out our trash haulers and say you are responsible for all of this traffic. Granted, they do generate a lot of the traffic, but I'd like to encourage the free market enterprise system. I think Councilmember Harrige's discussion was on point. I think we could learn a lot from the different comments that were held at the different meetings in Sedona when they looked at this issue very recently. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago that they looked at it.
Sooner than that.
And there was good discussion there, and I'd echo many of those points that, you know, we didn't explore tonight. I don't think it's a good idea to go to a single hauler method. I think we'll get stuck with the same hauler. I think that Councilmember Holst also raised a very good point about gray fox. That's a very real concern that we have even now where we do have the competition, and I worry about that as well. So I don't, charging a fee, that fee is just going to get passed on to the consumer, so we're all going to be paying a little bit more if we start charging the haulers more to haul. Again, I just don't support any of these three options. That's it.
Okay.
Sounds like a majority of you do, so just for the record.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add, this is not a decision. We'll move forward with some stuff and bring back. So council will still have a final say much further down the road. We just didn't want to go down this path at all if there wasn't interest.
Sure.
I do agree with Vice Mayor Henry's comments on recycling, and I think that we will bring this back as part of the discussion as we move forward with whichever direction we end up going, but we will include some type of recycling program or landfill reduction in the process.
And the last time, I'm sorry.
If I could, I apologize. I got focused on the trash side and not on the recycling side. I 100% agree with, and I think everybody up here would, with, you know, anything we can do to recycle and get stuff out of our landfills. And I apologize to you three ladies. I didn't mean to skip over that. I just got focused on the trash in our streets and the trucks. So. Right.
I just wanted to say, last time we did discuss this, we did reach out to the local haulers, and we got a ton of great ideas from the local haulers, and well, not from just local, but all haulers, I should say. And this isn't it wasn't meant to be an adversarial conversation at all. It's really to find out what's really best for our community, and we got a lot of good engagement from the haulers.
Mr. Mayor, I think there's a gentleman that would like to.
I don't know if I can speak or not.
You may. We're going to limit you to 5 minutes, sir, but you're welcome to, and you have to come up to the podium. And
Sure, thank you.
thanks for being here this evening.
Oh, you bet. My name is Chris Taylor. I'm the owner of Taylor Waste. And I know the city went down this road a couple of times. Actually, it's been quite a few times. Going back, my brother who owned Mountain Waste many years ago, he owned it for 20 years and ended up selling to Waste Management. And then, you know, so we've been around for quite some time, and I know the city's gone through this process many times, and it seems, and you may check your records on that, that as they've gone down this road, that many of the the people here in the city of Cottonwood, they like free enterprise. They like the opportunity to be able to choose who they desire to be able to service them. You know, one thing that you may want to look at, you know, I understand with the wear and tear on the roads, but there's, you know, many times, to be honest with you, we get blamed for like spots on the roads and different things. Like when we're in HOAs, they'll call us and say, hey, your driver left, you know, hydraulic fluid all over. We go down and look at that. Come to find out, it's actually a cement truck or somebody else that did that. You know, so you can't really. I'm just pointing that out because you know, I realize we do have big trucks, and they, you know, provide wear and tear, but we're not the only ones out there. How can we single out just the haulers? You know, there's other people that are going up and down the streets too. UPS, FedEx, you know, they're going up and down the streets quite a bit too. But going back to what I was getting at before, going down this road before, many people didn't like the idea of having to be told who they wanted to have service them. My brother, who owned Mountain Waste, he's now lives in Gilbert. He was telling me the other day that he has to use the city of Gilbert. If they mess up, he can't call somebody else. He said that he had his garbage can was sticking up a little bit like this, the lid. They didn't pick him up. He called the city and asked them why they didn't pick it up, and he was told, well, you have too much trash in your container, and you have to live with it. You have to live with who is servicing you. And you know, the thing with free enterprise, if we're not providing a good service to somebody, you know, somebody else is. If a competitor's not providing good reliable service, then you know, we can, you know, that's the great thing with free enterprise, that it makes, you know, sometimes that you got to look at that too, that, you know, the how the serviceability may go down too. So, but I'm willing to help out in any way. You know, as you look at and go down this road, I'm willing to help out and give any input or information that may be helpful.
Great. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you.
Okay.
Many times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from council?
No, just another thing to point out, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but it's not unprecedented in the city of Cottonwood. I think we kind of did that with People's Water Service. Pushed them all into one provider. Oh.
It's not unprecedented. Many communities do. Anything else?
Yes, sir. No.
Okay, you have your direction?
No.
All
right. One thing I wanted.
Sort of. Yes.
Okay, are we done? I was born and raised in Flagstaff, and we had citywide pickup. And of course, those employees were employees of the city, period. Okay. So we have to think of those things too. You know, we want to take on more employees, pay out more benefits. What are we going to do? You know, we have to be open-minded enough to see that this isn't going to be free, or probably even less expensive than it is now.
We're not considering, one of the options is not to take it in-house.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that.
So there wouldn't be employees of this.
I'm just pointing out.
Okay, right.
That when we talk, you know, how much of a partner are we going to be with these companies, you know? Who's going to provide the infrastructure they need to do all this recycling? Are they going to do it? Are we going to do it? Can they afford it? Can we afford it? No.
Certainly. And a lot of these things may have to run on a parallel track too, like a regional facility where it's a regional facility that all haulers can haul to within the Verde Valley. And, you know, again, there are many ways this could come about. I think we're looking at exploring some options, maybe one or two of those up there. Bring back more information from council so we can make a decision. And next time, just make sure there's seat belts on these seats, please, so we can buckle up for the conversation.
I'd also like to know some of the answers, you know, to some of the questions that were brought up, you know, tonight from the you know, local haulers. And even if there's some way of getting citizens' feedback, you know, if we can, you know, put a Survey Monkey out there on our website, or put something in the water bill. I mean, I would like to get feedback and have that kind of information, you know, because people don't show up at our meetings generally to tell us. They tell us individually, you know, but it just kind of depends on who you're talking to.
Sure. Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, then we will move on to the second item tonight, which is pre-budget department presentations by administration, city council, legal, engineering, public works, maintenance, cemetery, streets department, and streets construction and airport.
Good evening, Mayor and
Evening.
Council. I'm Kirsten Lennon, Financial Services Director. This is our last one. Then we just get into numbers. So I don't know which is more fun. For me, the numbers. But tonight, as you mentioned, it'll be in the order on the agenda, and I will let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Ron.
I was afraid of that. Mr. Mayor, Council, Ron Corbin, your city manager. I have two departments to present. The first is the city council, and I didn't look at the order, so Kirsten, please forgive me if that's the wrong order. But really the main objectives for next year is what I want to talk about, because your agenda aligns with my agenda, which is aligning the strategic plan. So really, that's what we plan to work on over the next 12 months, is implementing some of the ideas that were brought forward through the strategic plan. So the first evidence of that will be coming up at the end of this month as we begin to talk about the budget process and how we're going to make that more transparent, more inclusive, and of course, holding the line on the budget and evaluating positions and those kinds of things in the strategic plan. You also see, I think, in the budget will be some other great items, including more funding for small town events. So we look at things that will be for our kids and our families to do in our community. We'll look at the way we partner with other organizations to further the goals of the city council and the city manager's office. So I think in the next month, you're going to see a lot more of what it actually looks like when it comes to the budget. The budget is probably your most important statement and direction for city staff. So I think at the end of the month, you'll start to see some of that come forward. So it's really, I think, our goals. There's some specifics in there. I won't read them through you. You have them. They're in the agenda if the citizens want to see more of those. But I think I think one of your best accomplishments in the last year of the councils was hiring a great city manager. The verdict may still be out, but we will move forward, hopefully, for a little while with the current city manager as we move forward. But it's really about the strategic plan coming up. Same thing with the city manager's office. Our job is to implement the strategic plan. We finished our budget meetings at the department level, so we'll begin to put that together. Kirsten and her team and Helen have been putting that into a larger document. But the leadership team has also started to meet about what the strategic plan means for their departments, how we move forward with better customer service, how we move forward with business friendly, being open for business and those kinds of things. In 2 weeks, we will begin to compile a list. They're supposed to bring back actionable items that they're working on. So we picked out some overlying strategic points, and we're just going to move forward with that. So you as a council members will see that in the next month or so on the strategic plan. So the structure of the city manager's office and the whole city in general will be under review for the next year. So as a commitment I've made in public, every vacancy is reviewed, minus police, firefighters, and communication specialists. So part-time positions, full-time positions, I have a discussion with either Human Resources Amanda or with the department director. And the first question is, do we need to fill that position? We're down one position so far this year. Casey Rooney retired. We moved Richard Foss into that position, and Richard's position was not filled, the general services manager. So there is no general service managers, directors in the organization any longer. So, and that's the way it'll be, at least for the foreseeable future. So we'll continue that process. The other big thing that we're doing currently and will continue through the budget process is public meetings. So the mayor and I attended the Mingus Mountain Republicans group and talked a little bit about the budget. Marianne has scheduled a townhouse later this month after the 24th that we're going to discuss the budget. So we'll invite the public in to talk about the budget. Rudy has been working with other civic organizations for the budget team to go out and talk to about the budget. And then we will hold a couple open houses over at the Recreation Center on the budget in May. So that is moving forward, and we'll continue with that process until the budget's approved. So lots going on, but really when you ask about goals for this year, it's about implementing the strategic plan as approved by council. And I'll take any questions you might have.
Any questions for our manager? It's music to my ears, so thank you. Shall I call up the next?
Who's next? Oh,
I think that's your city attorney, also your legal department. And Ron must have had a past life as a lawyer, because one thing lawyers learn really early on in their career, if they didn't learn it in law school, is don't read your brief to the court. They've read it, so say something different. Just a little retrospective, it's been a very productive, busy, eventful year, both on the civil side and prosecution. We have a very successful contract prosecution program. Budget-wise, I want to make a note of this and just an explanation. We significantly underspent our external budget, which is great, and it should happen more often than not, because as we've discussed internally, that line, and this feeds into the larger conversation about budgeting and the difference between budgeting and spending, it's a contingency item. There's some things you just can't predict, and you want to have resources available and the authority to spend resources for the unforeseen. So we do, don't want to say pad because it's a freighted term, but we do have a larger external budget than we typically spend in a year, and this year by a lot. Not proposing any changes this year. And as Ron mentioned, because we just discussed this in a meeting yesterday, we're right in the middle of budget, and we're also implementing the strategic plan, but we're going to fold the strategic plan and our roles in implementing the council's plan into our goals this year and even more formally next. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the accomplishments, the goals, or the budget coming up.
Any questions for Steve? Did we just get lucky with not overspending your ability to overspend, or to hire outside?
Oh, no, I have an ability to overspend. This is your opportunity to take credit.
Yeah, it seemed like we were faced kind of with a lot of matters that required outside counsel this year.
I think some of that, and this is an evolution and a learning process for me, is sometimes when we engage external help, it's charged to my budget. And sometimes, depending upon what the matter is, if it's connected with utilities, the enterprises, we charge them to the utilities for accounting reasons. So when I got my last report of my department's external expenditures, it was something around between, I think, 10 and 20% of my allotted budget. Mm-hmm. What I budget for is not so much necessarily airport stuff or utility stuff. It's the uncovered litigation. If we get a lawsuit that happens not to be covered, that's one thing. And then whenever we are the plaintiff in a lawsuit, that's not covered by our insurance. Any matter, any dispute arising under contract, we are not covered by insurance. So those are the things I think about, I've thought about when I've set that number, which I think has remained pretty level over the last bunch of years.
Okay, thank you. Okay, engineering then.
I think we're referring to engineering, public works, maintenance, cemetery, streets. everything. He's the rest of your night.
All right, take a deep breath then.
Well, he's coming up to the, if I can, Mr. Mayor, our city engineer, who's also in charge of Public Works, apologizes. He had a pre-planned vacation before this was scheduled, or there was an overlap, so he asked if he had to cancel his vacation, and I said he did not. So he did want to apologize for not being here. He would rather be here for this presentation, but I want to thank Morgan for stepping in.
He should have invited us all to be on his vacation with him.
That was rude of him. Yeah. Actually, it was an easy one to take because obviously Robert gets a lot of things done. He's got a lot of goals. So this is going to sound really impressive, and 90% of what I'm going to say to you is nothing to do with me. But this is an easy one. Robert's done a great job. In fact, last year, I'll start with engineering, sorry. And sometimes it is a little tough to distinguish between engineering and public works, so I'll try to break that out a little bit. But last year, he obtained a grant through the Flood Control District for $265,000. That was to redo a floodplain study of Railroad Wash, Silver Springs Wash, and did the citywide master drainage plan. And he, of course, has a goal this year of completing and finishing up those studies. Those studies are underway right now. He did complete a retaining wall at Silver Springs Wash near Pizza Hut. Many of you may remember that wash blew out, nearly took out their parking lot, and under an interesting circumstances, that was a city-owned easement. So, but Robert jumped in and took care of that and did a great job. Also completed Mingus Avenue in front of the schools between Willard to 8th, and of course next year our goal is to finish that from 8th down to 15th. He worked with the school district to develop a school zone along Mingus Avenue, and that's been a big success. If you haven't done it, driven that lately, of course during the school it out, you do have 2 crossing guards, not just 1, and it's working very well. He completed the design of the sidewalks for both Willard from Beach to Paula Street, as well as the design for the sidewalk for Cactus Street. Also completed the design of the Main Street road diet. I know a lot of people have been talking about the road diet for a while. My understanding from Robert is that design is complete or very near complete, and probably could be approaching for advertisement for construction, or really restriping bid. Thank you, that's the word I'm looking for. Probably here in the next few months. And then, of course, he completed the detailed flood study of Del Monte Wash through Old Town, and that really impacted a lot of our ratepayers, our citizens' ratepayers, for what they're paying for flood insurance. That was a huge success. Even though we haven't done much yet as far as floodplain mitigation, just the detailed studies already saved our citizens quite a bit of money. And you'll see in accomplishments or goals here in a few minutes, he's going to be going after a lot of flood control grants to actually do that mitigation project through Old Town. Oh, and that's the first one on his goals, of course. Also, he's working on developing a stormwater ordinance. I believe state law actually requires us to do that, and we don't have a stormwater ordinance right now, or it's not in compliance with the law. So he'd like to move forward with that. Also, we're going to work on completing the State Route 260 water line, well site, and reservoir projects, and that's going to be a big project that I believe is funded and ready to go. I don't think the design is complete on that one yet.
I don't remember.
Okay. I know, I think that was
Look that way. I
yes.
don't remember.
If you have any questions on that, we'll get you the answers on that as soon as Robert's back in town. And then, of course, he wants to complete the Mingus Avenue project from 8th down to 15th. It may not go all the way to Main Street. There's a significant drainage improvement that needs to happen between 15th and Main, but I'm sure Robert will bring that back to you to discuss more. But anything on engineering? Anything else on engineering?
Questions for Mr. Scott? No?
I'll make a comment for Mr. Winnicky. Please don't drag Mingus on any longer when you watch this playback.
And I think
yes.
He is looking at the contract time. That was an unfortunate set of circumstances in the last contract. Moving on to Public Works, one of their biggest accomplishments is they successfully negotiated a contract for the transfer station, and that now operates at 0 cost to the city. Many of you remember that was a big kind of a black hole for a while, and now we have a third party operating it, and it's operating great, and they actually increased the number of hours. Their goals for next year is to develop an index to evaluate pavement condition to better plan for street maintenance. So in the past, our streets maintenance program has mostly been based on just age. When was it paved? When was the last time is it sealed? And not really done on an index of what is the exact condition. And a pavement index looks at a lot of different things that Robert could explain a lot better than I could. They also want to develop a sidewalk inventory. Of course, we have a sidewalk inventory. We know where it's at, but what we don't know is condition, ADA compliance. There's a lot more that goes into that. And a lot of times when we bring to you sidewalk projects, it's just where do we not have sidewalks and want some? But there's a lot of sidewalks out there that are in poor condition, non-ADA compliant. And when I say non-ADA compliant, they were built prior to the ADA laws going into place. So it's not that they're non-compliant, but we'd love to bring them up to date. So I think that's what they mean by increasing the sidewalk inventory.
And Morgan, if I can interrupt, we are bringing back both of those. There's been lots of discussion from different council members on the sidewalks. So he does have that list complete, and we will be bringing back the sidewalks to set the priority list in the next budget year. So you will see that again.
Nice.
We're just going to bump that one up to accomplishments then. So that was an accomplishment. I ought to go for him. He does want to develop, and I believe this is at the direction of the council, a community cleanup event. Many of you remember we had a free dump day for a while, and years prior to that we had a free, a large product pickup where actually city staff came and picked it up. Sounds like you're looking for something, maybe a combination of the two where it's more out among the community, but he'd like to look at revising that slightly from just the free dump day we've had over the last couple of years. And then, of course, he admired PD's comprehensive plan, so he wants to develop a public works capital improvement plan for all of his many departments, and that way it'll be easier for planning and just a pre-done. Sure. Anything on public works? Questions?
Thank you.
Parks and building maintenance. This is a department that's really done well over the last couple of years. They completed the retaining walls and landscaping at Riverfront Park. If you haven't been down to Riverfront, they've done an amazing job down there. It does look a lot different. They updated all swing sets in all city parks to comply with the new safety standards that came out a few years ago. Also, and this was, I thought, impressive, is they developed, and they even got a staff trained. There is a playground maintenance standards, and there's a certification for that. We now have someone who can do that. So who knew? But now they have that within their department, and they actually do weekly checks on our playground to make sure that's in compliance with national standards.
Nice.
They did improve the holiday light stands on City Hall and the BAC to prevent roof leaks. That actually prevented a lot of roof leaks in the past, and they improved the method in which that was done, so kudos to them. They did a weed mitigation for the airport, as well as a lot of old junk removal that's been left there since almost as long as the airport's been there, so I just wanted to throw that in, that they did a great job of cleaning up the airport for us this year. Their goals, and again, this is the Parks and Building Maintenance Department, their goals for next year is to develop a proactive maintenance program for all city facilities, not only roof maintenance, but HVAC and signage. Those are a lot of things that would be nice to plan on when they're going out, and they'd like to get that program in place. And then, of course, their big goal is to improve the aesthetics of all city facilities, and we're working with a few different ideas on that should be coming forward in the next couple of weeks and months. Anything on Parks and Building Maintenance?
Thank you.
Cemetery. Accomplishments, nobody got out last year. So. We're going to call that a good year. It's tough to do accomplishments at the cemetery. So though one of their goals is to convert the irrigation system to reclaimed water. So that's one of their goals for next year. And of course, we have reclaimed water right nearby. So that's the goal. Jumping to streets maintenance.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
You know, a few years ago, we had an attempt to increase our cemetery capacity, okay? And I'd like to see us renew those efforts again. I know that was put aside when the last administration came in. This is a project that I think is needed in the community, cemetery space. At the time that we looked at this a number of years ago, we had the American Legion and the VFW on board with at least labor at that time, but that was then. We also had in line people with machinery to clean the area and so on and so forth. And I think that it's time that we look at that project again. I think it's a needed project. And if we can keep that in mind. And I believe I have all those plans still at the house with me that we had then. And I will look for them and bring them out, and maybe we can move on that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, though, if I could ask, I actually wasn't listening hard enough for the first part. What did you call the project? I missed the actual direction, the request, Councilmember.
It was just the cemetery project to look at adding
capacity.
more capacity.
Thank you.
We
Is
had
there-
the airport land that was approved, it was at the north clear
Yeah.
zone.
I was going to say, I thought that the water treatment, that we use for that area was designated as future cemetery, Airport Ranch in Mingus and Black Hills.
That is correct. We do have a sketch showing that.
Is that what you're talking about, Ruben, or are you talking about down here at?
No, down here is full.
That's what I thought,
I mean,
okay.
at least it's committed. At the time, no, I'm serious. At the time that I looked at it, okay, there were 11 call it vacancies, okay? And I talked to my dad about it, he being a veteran, this was in the veteran section. And by the time I got back to the person that was in charge of that at the time, they went from 11 to like 9. And I reserved a space for my dad, and my dad and mom are buried there. And I have a brother buried there who we lost in Vietnam. And I wanted a space there, and I was lucky enough to land one there, But that cemetery it's full.
That's what I thought, okay.
And we also had the local mortician was trying to start a cemetery out on 260 that, for whatever reason, that project was didn't quite get the momentum that it needed. So we do need that space. I think it is important to our community.
It seems like where it was placed would be a natural fit in terms of land use.
Yeah, and it was at the end of the runway. Even the FAA said that they were in favor of that, having that clear zone there without homes. The residents that were close to this property had been contacted, and they were all in shall we say, agreement that was a good project to have there. So a lot was done, and then it was kind of just blown off as far as I'm concerned.
That's land we own, correct?
City
Yes.
is.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it's in the plan.
It's south of the runway.
Anyway.
And you would get fewer noise complaints.
Yes.
Put an asterisk in that right now, okay?
Yes, sir, we'll look in that.
No need for navigation easement signed. No. Moving on.
We'll bring that back to you. On to streets maintenance. A couple of their accomplishments from last year, they completed the 17th and Aspen drainage improvements. Many of you remember that was a public-private partnership. That it was well done the way it came together as far as the public paying for that. So that was neat to see, and that was done entirely with city crews. They developed a program to routinely sweep residential streets. So we've had a program for years in which our arterial and collector streets are swept, but we did not have a program in which our residential streets were swept routinely. It was really just done on a complaint basis. Now they actually do it on a routine basis. It's not as often as our collector streets, but it is done on a routine basis.
Morgan, if I can interrupt, one of the goals for this year is to get it back. It's in the shop. It was in an accident, and so it's being repaired. So right now, we don't have the capability to do street sweeping, but we're hoping we'll get an ETA soon on when it returns, and we'll be able to pick up the street sweeping program again.
It's really a cursed machine. I don't know if anyone's filled you in on the details, but it doesn't matter the street sweeper. It doesn't matter which one it is, but
it's any street sweeper.
Any street sweeper, yeah. So
that's true. Last year, they developed a training program for our streets maintenance workers on large equipment. In the past, it was more done just kind of, this is how we've always done it. Now we actually bring ADOT in. They have an LTAP program. I forget what LTAP stands for, local training something.
Technical Assistance Program.
Thank you very much.
It's right here.
It's right there. I'm looking at the wrong sheet.
I'm not that smart.
I was impressed. So ADOT came in. Of course, we invited several of the surrounding municipalities to participate in that program as well. But and that was a big shout out to David Hausman. He's done a lot for the training programs, not only training operations, equipment operations, but weed spraying and several other things they've brought in to reduce costs significantly. Their goals for next year, they'd like to explore installing warning devices at the wet crossings. Many of you know we have several wet crossings on our streets that we close routinely. When we close them, just the overtime call out alone is rather significant, let alone PD when they're sitting there until our public works staff can get there. So those are at 6th and Silver Springs, Aspen and 8th Street, and Camino Real and Oak Wash. Those are the three that they close fairly routinely, especially in monsoon season. They'd like to explore installing pedestrian crossings on Main Street. As you know, we installed one this year near Cherry, I believe. We'd like to explore installing more at 10th, at Aspen, and at Birch. Also, Main Street between Walgreens and Old Town was built in the 60s. There are several areas there where we should install handrails. Basically, the safety requirements when the road was built in the 60s for a drop-off on the back of sidewalk was much more allowable than it is today. So we'd like to go through and install some handrails along Main Street in several locations. Oh, and in addition, once our sweeper's back up and running, they'd like to start routine sweeping of our city-owned parking lots. Right now, that is not done routinely. It's done on an as-needed basis or a complaint-driven basis. So that's something else they'd like to add into that routine sweeping. Anything on street maintenance?
I have a question. I'm sorry. On the, and this may not be for you, but on the flashing beacons at the wet crossings, we have signs at all of those. So do the flashing lights, I mean, are they really, I guess what I'm trying to say is, are they really effective? We already have signs that say, do not cross when flooded, and it has the, green, yellow, red, and so.
The depth. I think that's something we'd have to explore with our police department, and especially our fire department might be able to answer that. I apologize, I don't have that for you tonight.
I'm just curious. I mean, maybe as it comes through council, it would be a question that I'll certainly ask. I mean, would we still have to close the street, or does the flashing light take? Is that enough?
Mayor and Councilmember House, I'll get back to you on that. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you that it sounds like new funding, and it's not funded yet.
Right.
So it'll come back during the budget process. There are still goals, but we'll make sure we have those questions answered for you.
Yeah, it would be questions I would ask if it comes through, sure. So I might as well let
Appreciate
you know now.
I had a question just about along the flood and drainage corridors and everything. How are we doing on making sure that the culverts and everything are cleaned out as we prepare for monsoon season?
I can get you that information. I apologize, I don't have that right now.
Okay.
If Robert was here, I'm sure he would know.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Streets construction. And you might notice that some of this overlaps with engineering because, of course, they jump back and forth handling most of these projects. But fiscal year 19 accomplishments, they completed the pavement preservation and striping programs. And that was left over actually from FY18 monies. But they mentioned, and of course, they completed the Main Street road diet. Their goals for this coming year, complete Mingus Avenue from 8th to 15th, complete sidewalks on Cactus Street as well as Willard from Beach to Paula, and then repair the dip on Willard. If you haven't driven Willard, the newer version lately, there's a rather significant dip developing. We don't know what's causing it. I think they're starting the exploration process, but they'd like to get that corrected. This is between Mesquite and Cottonwood Streets near the airport.
If I can also add, Mr. Mayor, given we're not going to be able to get the sidewalks done on Cactus this year, we're going to use that money to fix the dip before there's any significant injuries to cars. So we've already working on getting someone out there to tell us why there's a dip developing, and then we'll hopefully have enough resources there to go ahead and get that fixed.
Any questions on streets construction?
I have a question. I would just like to see, and you probably plan on doing this, the priority list brought back to council. I'd like to look at it again and maybe look at some reprioritization of the street.
I believe
that is the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Jump into airport. So last year, a couple of accomplishments. We installed more efficient LED lights on our overhead apron lighting. So not only will that be a cost savings, but one of the biggest savings for our overhead lights, and this includes street lights as well as the apron lights at the airport, they're near 35 feet tall. So one of the biggest costs is actually the replacement itself. So going to an LED bulb that will last a lot longer. For example, our electrician cost was almost insignificant to change them out to LED, but the bigger cost was renting the man lift to reach them. So that's actually one of the bigger cost savings you'll see when we convert street lights and overhead lights to LED. Conducted multiple public meetings regarding the airport noise, and we're looking into possible abatement. We proposed a revised fee to the Airport Commission based on a market rent study, and I do want to thank our Economic Development Council, because they actually funded that airport market study. That's going to help us a lot in renegotiating a lot of leases that are coming up in the next couple of years. We did successfully negotiate a lease for the unused modular building, formerly used by, for the skydivers. It's now used by the Experimental Aircraft Association, and they just put it on an event, a very successful event this last weekend. They're going to continue to put on events. They actually gave 39 miners free rides in aircrafts this last weekend. And they're going to continue to do great events like that.
And it was really cool if nobody went, and I went, and it was, the look on those kids' faces when they got out of those airplanes was priceless. They were just so excited. It was awesome.
And on that event, our FBO donated the fuel for that event at no charge to the pilots or the EAA. We established a committee to review the 1983, what's commonly called the 100-year lease. Unfortunately, that's stalled on my part. I've been looking at other projects at the airport, but we did establish that. I think we got a long ways in a solution, but basically we're just exploring solutions to many of the issues surrounding that 1983 lease. This may not mean a lot to you, but it meant a lot to our pilots. They completed a discrete frequency for our radio, our weather station of our radio. Before, when you're flying around, someone could key in the mic and the weather played off for like the next 30 to 45 seconds. Well, of course, that interrupted communication. Now they can actually be on 2 channels and they can switch when they want to hear the radio, so they're not interrupting communication as much. So we got that installed this year. Jump into 2020 goals. We'd really like to crack seal one of our taxiways. Most of our pavement at the airport, thanks to federal grants, has been recently reconstructed and is in great shape. We have one taxiway that we'd really like to crack seal coming up in the near future. We would like to complete an airport master plan. Now that is approximately 95% grant funded. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to gather input from the community and say, okay, where do we really see the future of this airport, and how do we want to move forward? We would like to locate a long-term non-motorized landing zone. What that means, right now the FAA says you have to allow all aviation activity. Well, that means hang gliders and paragliders and people with lawnmowers on their back. Well,
I've seen them.
Yes. Well, that doesn't mix very well with a lot of the motorized traffic. So what the FAA says we have to do is we have to allow them a location. We're trying to find them somewhere on the airport they could go that not near the runway. So we're exploring options on that. We would like to explore the possibility of adding security cameras at the airport. We've had several incidences over the last year. Fortunately, no one hurt, but we'd really like to add some security cameras at the airport. We didn't list this under accomplishments, but I'll be honest, it wasn't an airport accomplishment. It was our IT department accomplishment. As of last week, now every radio transaction that takes place at the airport is recorded. And so if a citizen calls in and says, hey, who was up there then? Who was flying? In the past, we had no idea. Nothing was being recorded. Now, thanks to our IT department, everything's recorded, so we actually have that data. Finally, for next year, we'd like to provide a facility that will be able to, Hangar B. Now, we do have a facility that can service an FBO. Hangar B, the heater in Hangar B is about to go out, though. So we put in the money last year. Fortunately, we didn't have to use it. It lasted all winter, and we probably won't need it this summer, but that's just one of the other minor expenses we may have coming up. Questions on the airport?
No questions.
As I said, that's our last of the goals and accomplishments and performance indicators. Our next budget meetings will be the 23rd and the 24th, when we start talking about numbers and revenues and expenses and all the capital and personnel requests. And we also have a town hall scheduled for April 30th to do presentations to the public.
Great.
So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else from Ron? No? Okay. And I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Nairn seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.